Hi everyone, I'm Professor Tech, and today we're celebrating, discussing, and critiquing the legacy of the Nintendo Switch. Buckle in because we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and most definitely the ugly. Why did you zoom in on my face? The Nintendo Switch released 6 years ago on March 3rd, 2017 in most regions, and since its groundbreaking new approach to home console experience, a lot has changed, while much has remained the same. Other console makers like Sony and Microsoft continue to push their home consoles as well as their online streaming platform services, while new competitors to the handheld portable gaming market like the Steam Deck and other portable handheld emulators and PCs have been inching in on Nintendo's market share. But all the while, Nintendo has maintained what it maintains best, a phenomenal library of first-party games and IP at prices that almost never fall down, even 6 years after launch. There are lots of things that the Switch's next-generation cousin will need to get exactly right. That's a video for the future, so if you want, make sure to get subscribed if you're interested in staying informed on what's happening with the new developments and what's going to be happening with what we are temporarily calling the Switch 2. But for now, let's dive in and see what the good has been for the Nintendo Switch in just 6 short years on the market. The good! I have 3 core things that I think the Nintendo Switch has done well during its time on the market, and these things are all aside from the fact that the Switch is shaping up to be one of, if not the best-selling consoles of all time, actually managing to surpass the PlayStation 2, which quite frankly, I don't think many of us think it will or thought it ever would, but hey, it might happen, especially in the age of digital downloads and cross-platform play. But yet, here we are. Firstly, I think the Switch has proven to be an exceptionally modular platform in more ways than the obvious one. Of course, during the initial launch window of the console, the sheer fact that you had a console that could be handheld and play premier first-party titles and play those same games at a slightly better quality when docked into your TV at home totally changed the approach to the console and portable gaming market. Suddenly, they were no longer 2 different entities split between mobile gaming and at-home console experiences. A full-blown console with the weight of one of the titans of the industry behind it, also able to be carried in the palm of your hands. There was nothing like it. In 2017, pretty bold, and it definitely paid off. But fast forward a couple years and we saw the release of the Nintendo Switch Lite. The same console, except it lacked the internal components capable of outputting to a television and included a fully integrated controller. Many would also argue, maybe rightfully so, that the D-pad on the Switch Lite is the superior D-pad on the Switch lineup, and the lightness, unintended, of the device was also a big boost for those that wanted to play portably. And an expanded market of the Switch could be tapped into. Little kids that were a little more rough with their devices and their parents. It's no secret that the first generation Switch, and even several of those thereafter, were not tanks by any means. The Joy-Con to console connections have a bit of flex and they get progressively more loose and worsen over time, and the screen is prone to cracks if you don't place a protective shield on it. Imagine you're a parent and you want a way to be able to play games with your kid, but you also want them to be able to play it portably when you're on the go while driving in the car or at the airport or wherever the family is traveling to and your kid needs to be occupied and probably quiet. Well, at that point, you're risking breaking the main home Switch because, well, they're kids. They're gonna break stuff. But the Switch Lite fixes all of those issues, and it comes in at $100 cheaper. Yeah, you lose out on one of the main selling points of the Switch, but you get a slightly more rugged device that's a little more prone to kids, that feels more solid without as much wiggle, and a slightly more comfortable controller setup, which is easier for small hands, and it can bridge the gap for those that really just wanted to migrate over from the 3DS and have a portable experience anyway. I very much hold that the Switch Lite was the death of the 3DS, not the release of the Switch itself. And then in 2021, we got the Switch OLED, a device that took the original Switch and improved upon its design. It's much more firm, albeit slightly still loose. It has a bigger and much better OLED screen with deeper blacks and smoother highlights, and a proper kickstand that actually makes tabletop play far more accessible, especially on things like planes where different flights and layovers can cause a change in viewing angle consistently. Second, I think that the Switch continues to have one of the strongest library of games to date. While yes, the Steam Deck does unlock a plethora of games for those already ingrained in the Steam Deck market and Steam PC world, other portable handheld PCs do much of the same thing, and almost all of Nintendo's first-party titles bring dozens of hours of full and complete play that feel optimized for this particular system, which is something you just don't get completely on the Steam Deck. We just don't talk about the sports games this generation though, because they're awful. And several years before we had Doom or Skyrim on Steam Deck or other portable PCs like AyaNeo, we had proper ports that ran natively on the Nintendo Switch. Yes, they were graphically downgraded and they weren't the best versions of those games, but but at that moment in time, when I realized I could play 2016's Doom portably and on the go just a couple years after its initial release. And that's something that I'm going to remember as a pivotal change in gaming. Suddenly, these intense and massive first-party experiences were on the go, and not in like a slightly watered-down way version like we had on the PlayStation Portable or even the PS Vita not too long ago. Still love both of the PlayStation Portable devices though, they're absolutely amazing. From Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to Breath of the Wild to Splatoon and Mario Party Superstars, no, the better one, not that one, not that one. This has been a solid generation for first-party Nintendo titles, and one in which Nintendo saw a return to form with titles like Metroid Dread and Super Mario Odyssey. And while the wave has definitely come and gone for it, Animal Crossing New Horizons got a lot of us, myself included, through those first few months of the pandemic by offering a relaxing, escapist look at the world while millions of people, including all of us, were going through the worst healthcare crisis in more than a century. Thirdly, I think that the Nintendo Switch has reinvigorated the console gaming market. It wasn't all that long ago that virtually everybody was saying that consoles were dead and that cloud gaming was going to completely replace the on-system experience. And while yes, that is becoming more and more true with each passing day, the Switch still demonstrated that there is a massive demand for self-contained experiences that don't require constant and robust internet connections. While Xbox Game Pass proved to be the best value of this generation, and last to some degree, PlayStation continues to flounder as they figure out how to optimize and use their own online systems. Nintendo's classic, perfect to the old, rather than expand on the new, approach to design has proven to be successful for them, just as it was for the Wii 2 generations ago. But while the Switch has done some amazing things, and I absolutely love the system, and it continues to be a comparison point for so many handheld portable PC, retro emulator, and console gamers, there are quite a few things that they just did badly. The bad. Okay, so to start us off, there are many things the Nintendo Switch has done poorly, and they're only showing more and more as time has gone on. Let's talk about 3 of those things. First, the Nintendo Switch is an immensely underpowered device. It was underpowered when it released, and it's only continued to show as newer and newer games are released for the system. Now, a large proponent of this is in the age of the hardware. It has been 6 years after all. But as we saw with the most recent Pokemon release, there is a significant issue with getting developers to truly optimize games for the Switch, and even when they do manage to do that, you usually have sub 1080p resolutions when docked, and in handheld it can drop to as low as 540p or even lower with additional frame stuttering in many games. Not exactly holding up to the specs of a 720p portable and 1080p docked experience as it was promised upon the Switch's release. While I understand that Nintendo's approach to proud and proven software development using older methods, we are finally in an era where they just will not be able to keep up if they keep applying that to the hardware side of things too. And to boot, there are already dozens of videos and tutorials on how to get Switch games running on PC and other portable emulators such as the Steam Deck in even better quality. None of those here on this channel. I'm still building my audience, and I'm not looking to get canceled anytime soon, so you'll have to go elsewhere to check that out for now. Secondly, the online platform services, and I'm not talking about the retro games and paid service options. No, I'll get to those in a minute when we get to the ugly section. But for a large percentage of players online play is a stuttery, god-awful mess to play that is so frustrating that I quite frankly don't even bother playing Switch games online. Paying for a service that is that broken is just flat out bad. There isn't much more to it than that. Nintendo needs to improve their online capabilities by investing more in efficient and updated server connection methods and actually embracing online play while still maintaining their couch co-op identity. The time has come, and if they don't get on board, they will get left behind in the upcoming generations. Thirdly, there are various versions of the Switch. But wait, Steve, I thought you were just singing the praises of the Nintendo Switch Lite. I was, but that doesn't exempt the Switch or any other versions of the Switch from my critique. From the beginning, the Switch had several hardware issues. The most common for the first generation of Switches was the abysmal battery life. Some players were reporting sub 2 hours of play, which isn't even enough to get most people through a flight or through their daily commute if they're perhaps the young professional market that Nintendo was so obviously marketing to during the first year of the Switch's release. So they released a version 2 and also patched out some vulnerabilities that made ethical hacking for a backdoor possible for modders and emulation, but that's a whole other topic. Cool. So the battery problem was mostly fixed. fixed. But at this point, cell phones and other tablet devices had screens and quality of life features that were just standard at that point. And here Nintendo was selling a device that still had lower battery life, even with the improvement, required proprietary chargers unless you wanted to risk bricking your system. I bricked my first Switch this way and didn't even have a decent quality screen, let alone the 720p resolution, which is just low powered even today. So they released the OLED Switch a few more years later, and at this point, fans, including myself, are vying for the next generation of the Switch. We're ready for the next thing, and the dated hardware has become so immensely dated at this point that there is no fixing it without a massive leap and bound forward in power. When the OLED released, and we all found out that it did have a better screen and an improved kickstand and an Ethernet cable dock that didn't really fix their online services, but definitely made it run smoother, it still ran using the same powered hardware, which meant games were fundamentally no different. They just looked a little bit better. And to top it off, it would cost $50 more than version 2 of the Switch. While enthusiasts like me still bought it, I can't agree that it was the best move across the entire market. It definitely wasn't the best move. And while yes, the Switch Lite was thrown in there and not having any ability to connect it to a TV was also a bummer, I do give that particular console a pass because of the reasons I listed in my good section. To me, Nintendo Switch Lite is basically just the 3DS replacement that happens to also play Switch games, but not in the reverse. So while those are some of the things that the Switch did badly, there were also some things that weren't necessarily bad, they were just kind of ugly. The ugly. The Switch has some positive qualities and some bad ones too, and some that honestly just don't make a ton of sense or have been corrected or could have been corrected fairly simply. Let's start with the first one, the Joy-Con drift. Yes, the same Joy-Con drift that now plagues virtually every segment of the gaming market that uses controllers, but it was Nintendo's initial response that made things so gross. At first, lots of users reported it and not much was being done. Players were left with the choice of working with what they had or spending an additional $60 to $70 on a new pair of controllers. And remember, this was at a time when controllers were still on average around the $50 range, so this was a huge bump up, and it was usually out of a need to replace a device, not a desire to just get an extra controller. Eventually, some strides were made to improve the issue, including some new return and fix policies from various vendors, but it's still a big strain on the Switch's history that I'm sure we'll fondly remember almost as much as the red ring of death from the Xbox 360 era, even if it wasn't nearly as bad as that. Secondly, the rollout of the virtual consoles. While I did really appreciate that the online service I was already paying for now had some included retro titles with the NES and SNES, didn't feel it made the service any more valuable. Coupled with the strange authentication issues that I ran into when trying to play in offline mode while on the plane or on a train, this just added to my headache of the online service that was already there. And then when they released the Animal Crossing update as a more premium update along with the Nintendo 64 games at an additional cost, it super dampened my mood. Yes, for some people this made those games convenient and easily accessible for the first time in a long time. That I don't disagree with, especially considering that most of Nintendo's audience is the casual gaming market, and that's who they predominantly appeal to. That's who they're selling to. But paying extra for games that are already easily accessible to most of the gaming market and most people that want them, even on the retro handheld gaming market, seemed a little rubbish to me, quite frankly. I did like that they added the split-screen online multiplayer aspect, but see all my previous notes on the reason why the horrible online services are an issue, and you can see why that's a double-edged sword when it really comes down to it. While now there are a smooth plethora of games available, including Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, as well as Sega Genesis, I can't help but have a sense of deja vu. There was another time in the console market in Nintendo's past that was solid and extremely well. They rolled out a virtual console series of releases only to then paywall lock them during the following generation and then completely remove them from the market in the generation after that. Sort of like Disney's Vault style back in the day. Talking about the Wii and Wii U. And what's worse, this time you don't own the individual games, just the subscription to access them. Something about this whole system doesn't feel super kosher in the long run, at least to me. Thirdly, I think that while the Switch has an incredible library of games, there is also an immense amount of bloatware out there on the Nintendo's eShop that is just terrible. This is a similar issue on platforms like Steam, but at least with Steam, there are refundable periods within the first 2 hours of play, there are reviews that are mostly trustworthy, and organization methods that make dud games that you don't like able to hide quite easily, whereas on the Switch, the organization system isn't great. I think in the next generation, Nintendo should still open a store to independent developers because gatekeeping markets is almost always a bad idea, but there should be more quality checks in place for certain games in order to ensure that they work properly, especially for big party first games, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, cough, cough, cough. So 6 years later, myself and dozens of other content creators are still talking about the Nintendo Switch, its legacy, and the ways in which it has pushed both the industry forward and held it back in other ways too. I absolutely love the Nintendo Switch, but I want to know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with my thoughts? Make sure to leave me a note down in the comments below, hit the like button, and I'm Professor Tech. I appreciate your time, and I will see you all next week. Bye, my friends.